Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Advocacy Hour. Continuing our conversation from last episode, we talked a lot about reproductive justice. Rebecca shared her story, I shared my story. And now this episode, we're talking about a little bit about how faith communities are supporting reproductive care, which I think is so important. And I remember last time, Rebecca, when we were chatting with Asha from RCRC, we talked about how there is this misconception that a lot of faith communities don't support reproductive justice and reproductive rights, but it's really just that the loudest voices in the room don't support it. If you kind of like scale everything back, it is very widely supported across faith practices and faith traditions, and they care about bodily autonomy and reproductive health care. And it's really a shame. I think this is kind of in general for a lot of things, that the people that have the biggest opposition are the voices that are the loudest on those topics. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that?
Yeah,
It's
because
so
they're the ones,
frustrating.
they want to be in everybody else's business. Meanwhile, the ones that are
And they have the
like,
most money
I
to be in
trust you
everybody's
to make your own
business.
decisions. Exactly, exactly. There is a thing about power and control that they have that I would say these faith communities on the side of reproductive justice just don't want to have that power and control.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want the people to be able to make their own decisions, and they just want to love others, right? Going back always to that, loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. That's all that they really want. And so, yeah, their
Yeah.
voices are softer, quieter,
Yeah.
but I would say definitely more loving. It's like that clanging cymbal. I think about that all the time. What Paul says, it's like clanging cymbals. That's all that is to me. Those
Yeah.
loud, power
Yeah.
hungry voices. But you're right, they are the loudest. And so I think they're the narrative that gets believed or picked up the most often, or because it's out there, it's what people assume must be the biggest,
The-
most believed in thing.
yeah. That's the norm. And it's also like, don't you have anything else better to do? Like, shouldn't
Seriously.
you actually, like, what does your faith actually tell you to do? How does your faith tell you to show up? I don't think that one of the number one tenets of being a Christian or being Jewish or being Hindu or being part of Islam is to tell women what to do with their bodies. That's not even like, it shouldn't even be in the top 50 things that your faith should be telling you what to do. It drives me
Yeah.
crazy. It drives me
I
crazy.
mean, I kind of think like I have enough stuff on my plate to think about my own relationship with God and like my own like I can't imagine. I just don't have the bandwidth to really have that much care about what somebody else is doing in their own
Yeah.
relationship with God. So yeah, doesn't
Exactly. It's like, if it's not raising my taxes or affecting my children, you do you.
right. Exactly.
Which literally everything that this administration is doing is raising my taxes and affecting my children. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. But
Yep.
I will say that there are faith communities that are doing great work, that are showing up, that are super religious or spiritual, or whatever the case may be, and they support reproductive justice, reproductive rights. And I'm really excited about our guest today. She is
Mhm.
the executive director of an organization called Sacred, which stands for Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity. And I'm excited to talk with her and share what that organization is doing, is because I think a lot of people, and specifically in the white evangelical conservative Christian spaces, they don't know that organizations like this exist. And so they don't know where to turn when they do need reproductive care or want to be a part of the reproductive justice conversation. And I kind of feel like this information is hidden from people in those communities because, for obvious reasons, right? That's just
Yeah.
my take. I don't know if you feel that way or see that, but I feel like they want to make sure that you don't have resources to make decisions about your body. So I'm excited that we get to expose our community to this organization because it's super important
Yeah.
and people don't
We're
have access to
assuming,
information.
yeah, and assuming that maybe the only faith-based ones are the what are they called? The crisis pregnancy centers. I know there are
Yeah,
those exist all across the country, and so I know in my mind I'm thinking those are the only faith-based organizations that exist, and that's just not true, as we found
yeah,
out in the last episode, and we'll hear more about in this episode today. So I think
yeah,
that is so important. Because people need to understand that there is more out there. And I know how scary it is to be in that place of what do I do?
yeah,
Who is there to support me and to help me through this time. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm super excited today too.
Yeah. All right. So we will be back with Latishia James from Sacred. Be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to Advocacy Hour. Today, we are joined by Latishia James. She is the executive director of Sacred, the Spiritual Alliance of Communities for Reproductive Dignity. Sacred is a multi faith network of religious leaders, organizers, and communities working to advance reproductive dignity and ensure that faith voices supporting compassionate care are heard. Their work focuses on equipping clergy and congregations with the tools to support individuals and families with dignity, moral agency, and spiritual care. Latishia, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Malynda and Rebecca. It's a joy to be here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's jump right into some questions. I'm just so glad to have you here today as well. We know that Sacred focuses on supporting reproductive dignity within faith communities. So tell us, what does that work actually look like on the ground?
Sure. So Sacred grew out of work that started in Texas. Specifically work that was being incubated by the Freedom Network. And that particular work looked like going into congregations and teaching them about reproductive justice, so that they could get a better understanding to help counter messaging that we know gets proliferated a lot by the anti-abortion movement, which I always make a point of telling people that there is no such thing as a secular anti-abortion movement. It is all religious, right? But it is all distorted religious teaching and religious messaging. And so something that has been lacking on our side for quite some time is us having our own moral narrative and reclaiming of religious authority. And so as that work grew in Texas, and other folks took notice and really started to coalesce around the fact that religious organizing needs to be a part of reproductive freedom work, we looked at, okay, what can this look like on a national scale, and what is the national response that is needed? Mm-hmm. And so Sacred now, fast forward many years later, we are operating, what I would say, within three areas: education, organizing, and transforming power together. Under education, we do that through our 9-module curriculum, A Sacred Journey, which is designed to guide communities through learning about reproductive justice. We connect the history of reproductive justice and the framework, which was developed by 12 Black women in 1994, to faith. And that is faith across a multitude of traditions. However, we make a point of making sure to ground in countering white Christian nationalist messaging, because that is what is so prevalent in what we see in policies that are anti-abortion and that are anti-reproductive freedom overall. And so within that curriculum, we help people find healing through storytelling and through unlearning some of that indoctrination, while also identifying the ways that communities can join in for organizing for reproductive justice. Under our organizing model, so building off of the work we do with the curriculum, those communities and congregations who decide to align around our curriculum after going through their own training and teaching can then choose to be a part of our Sacred network of congregations. Mm-hmm. And communities in which then get tapped into opportunities to actually do work. And so whether that's direct service work or advocacy work, some of our congregations get involved in electoral organizing. It's up to their decision and their capacity what the work looks like once they've gone through the training. Sacred is also the programmatic sponsoring organization of the Renewed Clergy Consultation Service. So for those who might be unfamiliar, I'll give a brief background. The original CCS, the original Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, is what the full name was, started in the late 1960s and was led by Christian clergy, Catholic priests, and Jewish rabbis. And it was pre-Roe v. Wade. These clergy and their wives and many of their congregants got together and created an underground network that spanned the US, Mexico, and Canada, helping women get abortion care before it was legal in this country.
Wow.
One of my favorite anecdotes about the work that they were doing is that the women, the wives of the clergy, would sometimes be the ones to go and scope out if providers were actually legit before taking women to the appointments, because we know so many horror stories from that time, and they
love
wanted
the
to
underground operation.
Yes, it was beautiful and amazing, right? And so once Roe v. Wade became the law of the land in 1973, CCS in that iteration disbanded, but also went into other forms. And so you get organizations like the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice grew out of CCS. Now, for a long time, because Roe v. Wade was the law of the land, we thought, okay, we don't really need this underground network in this way anymore, right? And then you started to get more secular direct service networks and things of that nature. But as we know, in the recent years, as attacks continue to increase, and then eventually with Dobbs and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, many of us started having conversations around, okay, well, maybe we do need some form of this again. And so that is where the renewed CCS has come about. It is a multi-faith network of organizations, congregations, and individuals who are committed to reproductive justice and are looking to see how it is that we can provide support in this new era of attacks on reproductive freedom. And then finally, with Transforming Power Together is where we have the Sacred Gathering, which is our biannual conference. The gathering, we deepen our connections, we craft healing together, hone organizing skills. So it's an opportunity for hands-on training, amplifying courage to build reproductive dignity and bodily autonomy for all. And it's also just an opportunity to recognize and see that we're not alone. It's our way of coming together to say, actually, we are the majority. Actually, the majority of people faith believe these things, and so here we all are together. How can we really sync up, learn from each other, and provide each other with that care so that we don't feel so isolated and siloed, because we know that the mainstream messaging in the media can feel so loud and overwhelming and convince us that we are the only ones who believe what we believe, and we know that that's not true. And so the last piece of that puzzle with the Transforming Power Together is our work around narrative change. We are very committed to shifting this narrative once and for all, reclaiming moral authority and developing our own moral messaging to counter the dominant narrative.
I am blown away by the work that you guys are doing.
Yes,
I just have
seriously.
to say, truly. And I'm so glad that the people listening to this are going to be exposed to your nonprofit, because I don't think people realize that there are organizations out there doing the work that you're doing. Also, because so many people naturally assume, because the loudest voices in the room right now, they assume if you are religious or a person of faith, you are opposed to reproductive justice and reproductive rights. And so hearing about all of these diverse faith communities that are actually for it is really comforting. But I would love to know, just as you're working with these diverse faith communities, and I mean, obviously Christian nationalism affects everybody, but with people that it affects everybody, but with people that, that are of the Jewish faith, or maybe Buddhist, or just the different diverse faith communities, what are some of the conversations that they have had within their spiritual practices about reproductive care and reproductive justice? I think that'll also be helpful for people to hear, to know that there are other religions that are in support.
Absolutely. I love this question. I love getting to talk to other faiths about how they view these things, because yes, while if you live in the United States, you are impacted by white Christian nationalism, whether you want to think you are or not. There are a multitude of beliefs, opinions, and thoughts from other faith traditions. So we, within both Judaism and Islam, when we're talking about the other Abrahamic faith traditions, there is a diversity of beliefs when it comes to how we should handle not only abortion, but reproductive care in general, and parenting. There is the belief around life not beginning until after a baby takes their first breath. Right. And so therefore, anything that happens before that, right, the mother is in complete sovereignty. The birthing person is in complete sovereignty of their own body. That is actually not unique to Judaism or Islam. It's actually multiple faith traditions who take that view. And some people can argue, and I would be one of those people, that it's also a view within Christianity. But that's a different conversation. I would say, for example, while a part of Christianity still different in their theology, the Catholic Church, for example, didn't always have an anti-abortion stance. That came about later, and really also came about because of the influence of evangelicalism and white Christian nationalism. And there's even a history of saints who have provided abortions within Catholicism.
Rebecca grew up Catholic, so I think you're also blowing her mind.
They kept that from me. I didn't know that.
They do. We also see that in a multitude of faiths, the life of the pregnant person is what gets centered, right? So if, for example, there is a complication, or if something is happening that is going to endanger the life of the pregnant person, that is always what takes precedence. That is in Islam, that is in Judaism, in Sikhism. We also see it in Hinduism, right? That it is about the life of the person who is already embodied, essentially. And I think that that's something that is really important for a multitude of reasons when we are operating in the landscape that we are in right now in this country, because it speaks to the systematic dehumanization that we see of birthing people, of women, of people of color overall, to consistently prop up the potential of life over the actual life.
Yeah, I think that's where I see the narrative activism that you're doing and talking about is so important, because it is in that message. Like, if we're not, the overarching message of the evangelical faith has had such a hold on this for so long. So I love hearing just the language, the change in language that I've noticed you using in the, while you're talking, and just the idea that we need to change the narrative around this, or we need to go back to actually the narrative that existed before.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we have all kinds of people in these faith communities. And so I'm curious, what kind of support do you see people needing often when they're navigating reproductive decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the primary form of support that I have encountered, I'm a former abortion chaplain. And so when I speak about a lot of these things, I'm also speaking from firsthand experience of being a person who bore witness and held space for folks making decisions across the spectrum. And I would say the number one thing that folks need when they're navigating these reproductive decisions is for someone to affirm their inherent moral authority.
Yes.
Because each and every one of us, right, particularly as people of faith, if we believe that we were made in God's image, however you conceptualize God to be, if we believe that we are the hands and feet of God, right, if we believe these things, then we have to believe that we embody moral authority. We embody divine intelligence. And so if I am trying to navigate a decision about what to do with my body that my creator made, and my creator made my brain and my spirit and my ability to do these things, then I need to be trusted that I know that I am the sole authority on what is going to be best for me outside of my and so I would say that's the number one thing that folks need, is that affirmation.
That is so important. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I would say connected to that is people need folks who are able to listen to them without judgment or without attempting to provide advice. Or how I would say it sometimes is that they need people to resist the evangelical savior complex.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea that they need saving, that they don't know what they're doing.
Sure.
Right? There's this infantilization that happens. And we see it for women, we see it for children, right? That like somehow all of a sudden, when it comes specifically to making a decision about pregnancy, I know nothing. I don't know what's good for me. I don't know what, I don't know my body. Like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting to watch it happen in real time. Like, fascinating that like you might trust me, let's say a person who's a scientist, like you're going to trust my authority on, you know, what I know and whatever scientific theory there is. But the moment I'm like, oh, I'm trying to make a pregnancy decision,
then I know nothing.
Then I know nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
So that we need to really resist that when it comes to helping people navigate reproductive decisions. There's an ability for folks to be comfortable with the conversation and the expansive, complicated possibilities that there are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when we are navigating these decisions, there's a lot of gray. It's not a black and white situation.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so what I would say is that if you are a person who is wanting to get more involved around reproductive freedom, reproductive justice organizing, particularly in the way of direct service and holding space for people, then you also need to be a person who's comfortable with the both and, who's comfortable with multiple truths and realities and possibilities. As well. Folks navigating reproductive decisions need people who have a basic knowledge of how to access care. Right, from your given location, how to ID and avoid places like crisis pregnancy centers, who do not mean people well, right, who are giving purposefully false information, and also understanding of human anatomy, right? So if you are someone who is uncomfortable with your own body, who is uncomfortable having conversations about sex and sexuality, right, who has any shame around that. And this is not to shame people who might be in that place, because many of us start there.
Especially if you're coming from an evangelical church space. That's like the number one thing. Yeah.
Especially like that was literally drilled into me every day of my life, right? Growing up. Quick aside, I grew up Pentecostal, so like I'm saying all of this from a very deeply personal place.
Very lived experience,
But yeah, if you are still a person who has not yet done your own grappling with those things and carry some of your own internalized shame, I'm guaranteed it's going to show up when you try to help someone. And that is a very precarious place to be. It's a very dangerous place to be, because oftentimes when a person is making a reproductive decision that they are unsure about, it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And whether you mean to or not, if you have not done your own internal work, you could inadvertently project that shame onto them when they're in the very vulnerable place. And so part of why our curriculum, A Sacred Journey, is structured the way that it is, it starts with healing. It starts with your own story. It starts with, hey, how do you feel about these things? And how do you view these things before we ever get to the organizing and advocacy? Because will show up. And so that is really something that I don't think I can stress enough, the importance of doing our own internal healing and work before we step to the plate to try to support others in navigating reproductive decisions.
It's so important. It really is incredible. And I always make this point that's why so many people struggle with the love your neighbor as you love yourself, because they haven't done that personal work to love themselves, right?
Yep.
Like you can't show up for other people if you're internalizing all of these, like you're a sinner, you're this horrible person, you're this, you're that. That's what you've grown up with. You're never going to love somebody the way you love yourself because you don't have any self-love.
Girl,
so I love
Malynda, yes. You and I are on the same page. I say that all the time. Yes.
And it's so obvious in the way that they show up that they're suffering from a lack of self-love. And I think that see, now I'm
Yep.
about to go on a tangent, but that's also why I think I'm about to go on a tangent, and Rebecca knows I
Do it.
do this. But it's also why they have such disdain for the LGBTQ community, because they are the freest
Absolutely.
people in their expression and their identity, and they're so happy and love who they are finally, and they've released all of
Absolutely.
these chains, and that's why they hate them, because they wish that they could be as free and as
Yep.
happy and have that self-love. Okay, tangent
100%.
over.
That is also not a tangent. Hold on. I just want to say that is not a tangent. That is part and parcel to this work, because we're talking about bodily autonomy, right?
Yeah.
And when for Sacred, when we talk about reproductive justice for everybody and everybody, the trans community is inclusive of that, because attacks on abortion care are not separate from attacks on gender affirming care, are not separate from attacks on IVF care, right? They are all interconnected. And so that is exactly the truth and the case. And the ways that shame has been weaponized by white Christian nationalists and evangelicals is, one, it's deplorable, but it's also like awestruck a little bit, because you're like, wow, y'all really, you've nailed this thing. You know exactly.
Really, like, they did that. Like, they do it well.
They do it so well. They do it so well, because when you keep people stuck in shame spirals, they're going to continuously do the thing that they think is going to get them the approval that they are actually needing to seek internally.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And even if that thing is hating other people, even if that thing is attacking other people, making other people feel bad about themselves. I was about to curse. I don't know if that's allowed on this podcast, so stop myself. But making other people, right, hate themselves.
Yeah.
Even if it's the way to go about it, they're going to do it, because they're constantly seeking that external validation that actually can only come from doing the thing that God said, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. You know, sometimes I'm like, maybe we should all just retake elementary English and learn about metaphors and similes.
How to read. To go back to, how to read. Let's just...
Right? Because it's literally the as. It's such a small word, but it's like, if you miss it, then you're missing everything, right? You can't actually fully embody love of another if you don't love yourself.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful, so powerful. And that leads me to my next question, though, because I know you talked about the training, and also just when you bring clergy in, I'm curious what that looks like, so that they are able to provide compassionate care for people rather than judgment, because it does take a lot of work to, one, shift these narratives in your mind, change your perspective, and then be able to show up for other people. So what does the process look like, or the program that they go through, the curriculum that helps them get to this point of being able to provide compassionate care to people?
Absolutely. So I want to first name that it's not only clergy that we are training faith leaders across the spectrum. And so we employ a train the trainer model. That's the first thing, because we inherently believe in grassroots organizing, and that these types of transformative efforts need to come from within the community. So when we invite leaders in, whether that's lay leaders or clergy, that is a requirement of our curriculum, is that you do have to hold some sort of leadership position within your faith community, so that we know that you have influence and that you hold power in an ethical and responsible way that will actually create change. And so we start by our first module. The invitation is, we start with your story. So one of our founders, Reverend Angela Tyler Williams, she used to always say that everyone has a reproductive story, whether you ever decide to be a parent or not. And everyone has a faith story, whether you practice or not. And so our curriculum, our first module, begins in that place with, what is your reproductive story? What is your faith story? And through that storytelling, folks start to reveal a lot of things about themselves. They start to learn a lot of things about themselves. We have had folks that as they've gone through the curriculum, those first two modules, we've had questions around, why are we talking about trans people? I thought this was about abortion. Why are we learning about things like reservation camps, right, for Native folks? I thought this was about abortion. It's like, no, one, it's not all about abortion. Reproductive justice is not only about abortion.
Right.
Two, if we are grounding in the holistic framework of reproductive justice, that includes trans people, that includes what happened to Native and Indigenous people, it includes chattel slavery, it includes gun violence, right? It includes environmental racism, it includes climate change, it includes all of these things because it's an intersectional framework, it is an intersectional issue. And so we really start in that place. And as folks begin to share their stories and their learning, and they realize they might be really well versed in abortion access, or they might be really well versed in racial justice, but then they have these other growing edges and these other areas that they need to explore. One of my favorite activities that we do is we take people through this exercise in which they reflect on their firsts in terms of coming of age. So puberty, first kiss, first sexual experience, first crush, right? And they don't have to share out loud or acknowledge anything, but they can reflect afterwards. And sometimes things will come up around like, I didn't realize until just this moment of reflection that perhaps that was not a consensual experience for me. Or perhaps, I actually wasn't as prepared as I thought I was. Or actually, I had so much love surrounding this experience for me. I was so supported through it. And in that process, they are both healing within, but learning how to show up.
Yeah.
For others, right? Yeah. They're learning how to orient themselves towards the complexities of what we talk about, the reproductive spectrum, right? Everyone, I think, a lot of times when folks hear reproductive justice, reproductive freedom, access, whatever term you want to use, they immediately go to pregnancy.
Sure.
But menopausal care is a part of reproductive care and reproductive justice, right? We're talking about things like testicular cancer or breast cancer, whatever it may be. That is reproductive care.
Everyone has a reductive view of it, for sure.
A very reductive view. And so our goal is to expand it. Our goal is to get as expansive as possible so that folks can also locate themselves on the spectrum of comfort of what they can advocate for. Right? Because if you're not a person who's comfortable advocating for abortion access past a particular time in a gestation, you need to know that before you just start going out being, the best advocate ever. If you know that your area of reproductive justice that you want to really nurture is around trans kids having gender affirming care, great, right? We need people there. If you know that for you, it's really about the environmental factors, or it's really about the systemic factors and the government and access to childcare and things of that nature, we want you to be able to locate that, right? Because we need advocates and organizers in every single area. And so by starting with your story, by starting with your own conceptualization, your own indoctrination, and by helping folks to really ground in the expansiveness of the reproductive justice framework, it allows them to then connect later on down the line to, okay, where do I fall on the spectrum of advocacy and organizing?
That I can hear like the meaningfulness and all of that. Like as you were talking, I was like, man, I bet some of these people might also have like moments of joy that are sparked that they had forgotten about too. I mean, even thinking about a first crush, that's like a joyful thing. And we just learn through these stories or the reductive nature of this to like exclude those feelings. And it does really make it overly simplified on this one issue and not able to be expansive when we can't tap into that. So I can just like kind of feel that meaningfulness that is being built in for each person who's involved. And I am curious what maybe some of like the most meaningful examples you've seen come out of that for the way that faith communities have shown up in this space.
Yeah. So I think when I think about some of the faith communities, I'm actually traveling right now to visit with one of our congregations. And they went through the earlier version of our curriculum, and now they're about to train in the latest version of our curriculum. And they've decided now to do it with 2 other congregations. And what I love about that and why that is meaningful to me is because it's doing the very thing that we need right now if we are actually going to beat the fracturing that is being created by white Christian nationalism, which is that they are coming together in community to wrestle through something. One of the things
really
that I love about our work, it's very exciting. One of the things I love about our work is that we are really big on creating containers to have courageous conversations. Because we need to be talking to each other more, right? And talking at each other or over each other, but actually talking to each other and listening. And so the idea that they are expanding this beyond just their congregation to 2 other communities in their city where they're going to be, going through the modules together. And we always invite facilitators. We say, if you get to a module and things come up and folks are like, this isn't making sense to me, or there's tension or something, do not go on to the next module. Stop. Go deeper, not wider. And I get very excited about the idea of a more diverse group of folks coming together to go really deep with one another around this unlearning and healing and training journey. So that's something that's exciting to me. One of our other congregations in Florida, they went through the curriculum at a fairly quick pace. And at first we were like, did y'all really get in there? But then they let us know that they set an ambitious deadline for themselves because there was legislation coming up. And they be able to coalesce and come together in coalition to formulate a plan, a campaign, or an organizing strategy to advocate against that piece of legislation. And we were like, oh, heard, understood. Yeah. And
that's a good reason. Yes.
Yeah. It was an excellent reason. And they did it and they actually won.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And so, the more I see folks becoming equipped with the tools and the language that they feel like they've been missing, the more bold they're becoming. Right. And we're seeing more and more folks who are taking bigger risks to speak publicly, whether that be from the pulpit or, from a national stage. And why I think it's so important that it starts within their own faith community is because oftentimes that is the biggest challenge for them. Right. I have encountered clergy specifically who would be willing to go and speak on the steps of the Supreme Court, but wouldn't give a sermon in their own church about it.
Wow.
And I was like, help me understand that. For many of them, it was that fear that their congregations weren't as progressive as they thought. And so they didn't want to lose their jobs. They didn't want to be challenged in a way where they would lose their communities. But then in the end, they found out that their congregations were actually waiting on them to say something. Right. And so this journey that they go on together of revealing that they had misconceptions and assumptions about where folks were in their beliefs and what they were needing. And so that's some of the most meaningful, I think, evolutions that I've seen with some of the folks we've worked with.
I'm just blown away by all of this work. And I could listen to you talk about it forever because I'm just like, oh, how can we partner? How can we work together? How can we do something? And I'm super excited about all that you're doing. It's such needed work. Can you let all of our listeners know, one, where they can follow Sacred if they want to get involved, if they want to take a training, whatever the case may be, let them know all of the information because this is such important work and people need to know more about it. And I'm really glad that we're able to share you with our community.
100%. Thank you. I'm so glad that you asked me that. So this is actually a very exciting time for Sacred right now. We are in the midst of our very first visibility campaign, our first comms campaign, of which Malynda is a part as a creator, which we're very thankful for and excited about. And so I would say to make sure that you are following us on Instagram. We are at sacred_repro on IG. I would also invite you to sign up for our newsletter. We have a very robust monthly newsletter where we put out a lot of information. We also have a blog where we share different thoughts and opinions. And so our website is www.sacreddignity.org. And you can learn more about the curriculum there as well if you head over to our education tab. We are looking to do a couple of virtual trainings later this year. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you will be first in line to learn about that information. And we also just released the save the date for our next Sacred Gathering, which will be taking place in April 2027 in Cincinnati, which we're very excited about. Ohio is a state where there's a lot of activity. We have multiple partners there as well. And so it's really important to us to, whenever we're picking where the gathering is going to be, it's important to us to go places, one, where we have local community and partners, but also places where we know that the fight is one that is very alive, I'll put it that way, as well. And the last thing I'll say, because our director of strategy, Lindsay, will not like it if I don't, is that as part of the visibility campaign, if you go to our website, that's www.sacreddignity.org/neighbors. You will learn a lot more about how it is that we're trying to change the narrative on a public level.
Incredible.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really loved this conversation. And I know
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Absolutely. We'll link all of your information in the notes and we'll be right back. All right. Thank you again to Latishia James for joining us from Sacred. Make sure you follow all of their incredible work. I am so glad to know that they exist because
me too.
I mean, what incredible work. I was just blown away. And the whole time I was thinking, we need to partner with them. We need to figure out something. We need to make sure that people have access to all of these resources. So follow all of their stuff. If you are new to Advocacy Hour, just like, comment, subscribe. And thank you so much for watching and being a part of the TNE community. We good, Rebecca?
See you next time. Yeah. I got nothing more. We're good.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.